the Yuletide version of Hammer and Vajra. I will start off by saying, Hail the Aesir and the Vanir. May the gods guide us. May our oaths keep us. May our deeds free us. May our ancestors aid us always. Let the gods' blessings be over our heads. Let the festivities and merrymaking ring loudly in the name of the Yule Father, Odin. Hail. So this is my Yule episode. It'll be a little impromptu. For some people, it will come out on the 23rd. For some, it will come on the 24th, which will be Christmas Eve. And this will be a pretty long episode. Bear with me. I have a lot to cover regarding the Yule season, and probably even more than I've written on even more than I have to cover here. But I do want to cover quite a bit. You'll find out. So for this Yule season, so basically, hail to a merry Yuletide Hammer and Vajra episode. To be honest, I hesitate to make this episode since so many people, the concept of Yule is different. For Christians, it's an alternative to Christmas, which I know isn't the case, but it's more nuanced, although I know the word nuanced is well overused, than Christmas or Germanic faith, or even the Christian faith. As there is also a Celtic celebrations, the solstice, and other Indo-European celebrations within this time period. I'm pretty sure there's of course you have Saturnalia, you have a Persian, basically form of the winter solstice as well as plenty of others, right? By this time period, I mean the end of November through early February. Yes, you heard that right. Yule and, in general, Indo-European winter festivals cover from late November to early February. This makes it especially hard to talk about as people become more and more reconstructionist and or eclectic, one or the other, or syncretic. Those who follow the strict lunar calendar instead of a solar one, or a Saxon continental calendar, or an Anglo-Saxon calendar, or a Scandinavian lore-sourced only calendar, there will be different dates for each celebration, or what is going on during those celebrations, or what time, and what they say constitutes as Yule. This makes it highly difficult to write about, speak on, or in general discuss, what is Yule, without someone being on a purity spiral who tells you that whatever you are celebrating is wrong. Not that they aren't incorrect, depending on their specific focus. Though some will call it a New Age trope, I tend to focus on the celebration around the winter solstice time period. As we know that Christ wasn't really born on the 25th, though I know some people argue that it was a popular case depending on when a spiritual figure or a religious figure was born, to predict the same time around the next year when they were being, celebrated as their birth, or when they died, their birth was previous. It's a astronomical and astrological concept, but we know that Christ probably wasn't born on the 25th, and that the Roman Saturnalia was merged pretty much within Germanic Yule, which, mind you, adjusts and changes per the seasonal time and rotation of the sun and moon. Germanic Yule, depending on the tribe and region, wasn't always, the winter festivals in general, of what we call Yule, wasn't always celebrated at the same time, as well as other Indo-European faiths and solar calendars. I will openly say it is very much valid and important to read the sources and those who have constructed the dates, which are tribally or locally aligned to different groups. Basically, those who are doing research and things on continental Saxon, Anglo-Saxon, certain Scandinavian, certain Celtic, if you want to strictly adhere to their tribal interpretations or their reconstructionism, it's very important to figure out which dates you're going to celebrate. That being said, I will discuss into what Yule is, and what is going to be a very long episode here, so buckle up. without getting too much into linguistics, I'll get into what Yule or Yolu is called. It's or what it is in general. It's a winter festival historically observed by Germanic people that was incorporated into Christmas during the Christianization of Germanic peoples. Currently, modern pagans celebrate Yule independently of the Christian festival. You'll see pagans in general, including the so-called Wiccan variety, who celebrate Yule. Unfortunately, I even say Satanism and Satanists who celebrate Yule in basically a way to celebrate the winter time and winter festivals without the Abrahamic baggage. The things that are connected with Yule are that of the wild hunt, often specifically with the Germanic, the High Allfather Odin, the Anglo-Saxon celebration of Mother's Night, which is a celebration of the Disir, which are the female ancestors or female goddesses or female spirits. The term Yule and cognates are still used in English and Scandinavian languages, as well as in Finnish, Estonian, to describe modern-day Christmas. So often Christmas is exchangeable with Yule, Yuletide. Often festivals occurring during the winter season are also considered Yule-themed. There are traditions that are of the Yule log, the Yule goat, the Yule boar, Yule singing or caroling, which I'll get into later, and other pagan-connected traditions. The modern noun Yule descends from an Old English with many cognates, and ultimately it became associated with the 12-day festival of Yule, or later Christmastide or Christmas. The month of Yule, whereby the period which the Yule festival was December, and then the period after was of Yule was January. Of course, we know this doesn't ring true depending on your region and your tribe. Words that cognate with Yules, there's apparently a Gothic word that cognates, which is Jules, or the Old Norse and Faroese and Norwegian of Yule. You have Danish, Swedish, and even Norwegian versions of this term. They think it's a Proto-Germanic term. The term existed exterior to Germanic. Whether the term existed, it was Germanic or exterior to Germanic is uncertain. There are numerous attempts that have been made to basically pull the Indo-European cognate beyond or further origin sourced than the Germanic and Proto-Germanic. The compound of Yuletide or Yuletime, tide meaning time, is first used around 1475, people think. Yule is a pagan-focused holiday, even more so recently, whereas previously it had been a pagan and Christian term interchangeably. Among the list of names of Odin, you have Yulnir, which is the Yule one. Sometimes you'll hear the word Yule Father, which is the father of Yule. Father Christmas also kind of plays into this. In Greek, composed in the 12th century, Yule is interpreted as one of Odin's names, which is Yulnir, closely related to Yulnar, which is sometimes a poetic name for the Aesir in general. In Norse poetry, you'll see that the word for feast sometimes uses the word Yule. So you'll have Hugin Yule, which is the Raven's Feast or Hugin's Feast. It has been thought that in Old French you'll have Yolif, which is Yoli, which was borrowed in Old English in 14th century as jolly. That's why you have Jolly Old St. Nicholas and Jolly Christmas, jolly in general. Different words in French and English and Anglo-Norman connect to the concept of the word Yule, which has been seen from probably 1100s to 12th century AD. Yule is attested early in the history of Germanic peoples. Of course, in the Gothic calendar from the 5th to 6th century, it appears in the month name of Fruma Julius. And in the 8th century, the English historian Bede, Venerable Bede, as some people call him, wrote of the Anglo-Saxon calendar, which included the months which would correspond with either December or January, which he called Gyola or Gyuli, or some people consider that as a Y, right? Yola or Yoli. Basically, what he was saying is that the Anglo-Saxons celebrated something that corresponded to Yule within January to December to January time frame, similar to what we're talking about and what we celebrate now. While the Old Norse month name of Yulir or Yilir is similar attested, the Old Norse corpus also contains references to an event, the Old Norse, by the name Yule. The Prose Edda and the Skjalda Stabhalmal, different names the gods are given. One is the Yule beings, Yulnal, which a work of the Skald Eyvindir, the term is often used. Again, we have produced Yule beings' feast, the mead of poetry, our ruler's eulogy, like a bridge of masonry. In addition, one of the numerous names of Odin, of course, is the Yulnir, referring to the event as well. The dates of Yule. Some celebrate the 21st of December with the winter solstice. Others celebrate towards the mid-January to early February. This all depends, of course, like I said previously, to your tribe and people. I tend to celebrate around winter solstice time, which is cognate with Christmas, because many people already have the holidays built in for it, and it is easier to do basically what I would say the zeitgeist of celebrating in conjunction with other holidays and the solstice time periods. So we'll go on to themes about Yule. The Christ thing aside, which we can discuss in further on later on, you have the Yule concept of Santa Claus. So I've been to Italy, right? And I actually lived in Italy for a little while and lived in Germany for a little while. But in Bari, Italy, you have a Saint Nicholas shrine. I would say the whole basilica, shrine, and churches there are all dedicated really to Saint Nicholas. They had a real focus on Saint Nicholas, which is very interesting that it was built on top of a Mithraeum. That's a whole nother topic. I actually had a request to go into Mithraism. Let's just say they excavated a whole bust of Mithras, actually a whole body of Mithras. I went and prayed at that area, but a lot of solar imagery, a lot of Mithraic and religious imagery there. So yes, there was a saint who Saint Nicholas is based off of, right? Who did bring presents to children. This is not a really contested thing. There's no reason to lie about that. That's a case, right? But what was Saint Nicholas and what is Odin have sort of merged over a while, right? Especially as Christianity Germanified, right? Germanicized, as you would. So regarding Saint Nicholas and paganism, it seems that there was a video a few years back with Professor Jackson Crawford, who I know is really popular with his translations of the Eddas and the Havamal and teaching people Norse. I'm sure he knows how to speak and pronounce things way more better, more eloquently than I do, because I'm just learning other Germanic languages besides English, and that I know English and German, some of the German I know. But because of that, he had a video regarding Santa and saying Santa was definitely not representative of Odin whatsoever. So a few years back, I analyzed that video and made a little bit of a rebuttal, right? Because I felt like we've absorbed so much, especially if you read the Germanization of medieval Christianity, right? Or you read things like Stephen Flower's Northern Dawn, and even my own work. You'll see that there's a lot of of Germanization and Celtization, where the Germanic and Celtic European concepts influenced Christianity. So I think it's really unfair just to say point blank and dryly cut that Odin has no influence over the concept of Santa Claus. So in some ways, yes, Jackson Crawford was correct. Because Santa and many myths that surround Christmas aren't just about Odin. We know that. Because they're an amalgamation of various Norse and Indo-European culture, along with the original Christian and Near East concepts. Originally given the Germanic northern and western influence of the Santa myth, which is primarily influenced in the Northern American concept recently. The North American concept, you think of the Coca-Cola Santa and the red suit of Santa, etc. One can begin to understand how Santa is both various Christian saints. There's more than one Christian saint that was absorbed in Nicholas and Santa Claus, and the pagan concepts merged together. So I'm going to list a few things. Of course, this is amongst many that connect to Christianity, but also paganism. So, of course, you have Sleipnir. Sleipnir has 8 legs, and Santa has 8 reindeer. So first, Jackson Crawford debunks this arbitrarily. Obviously, 8 legs don't equal to 8 different beings. But I suppose he hasn't heard of allegory before. Also, when 2 of the reindeer are called Donner and Blitzen, thunder and lightning, it is an obvious connection to Thor, Donner, and which is Thunor. And yes, the 8 reindeer are a newer addition because he used to have 1 and sometimes have more than one pull in his sleigh. You also see that Odin has of course, Sleipnir is 8-legged, but Thor has 2 goats that pull his chariot, of course, through the sky or through wherever he travels. What he doesn't do is delve into the various connections of the wild hunt. Jacob Grimm popularized the term wild hunt and wrote about it in his Deutsche Mythology, 1835 is when that was produced, as proof of surviving Germanic pagan beliefs. The wild hunt is often thought to ride through the clouds or mist in the night sky and claim lost souls. Often they would be appeased by offerings, which is much like leaving offerings for Santa and his reindeer. Other figures aside from Odin that were euhemerized in the tradition were Theodoric the Great, the angel Gabriel, the devil himself, Charlemagne, or the Welsh Göte Apnud, which I probably pronounced that exactly wrong because I'm not good with Celtic languages, being even though part Celt myself. Someone's welcome to help me. Those who were associated as hunters accompanying their leader were usually spirits of the dead, or either returned or arose by his passing. So basically, the spirits of the dead would return or would arise by his passing, right? Similar to the concept of the later Christian thief of the night of Jesus, who would bring forth the rapture, and those who the dead would arise. The Fae is also another concept, which the Fae were on another world, another veil, but often associated with the dead. Or elves or Alf, which were sometimes Valkyrie or Cyclopomps. If you haven't noticed, the theme is that of the dead and passing, as well as one's ancestors, Fae or Elf or Alf, or the ancestral spirits. Often the dead of the year or the sun is seen in the winter. Baldur's death, for instance, can be seen as the starting of the winter. This is inherently an Odinic concept, or one that can be connected to Odin, the old world or Odin, but is both a paganism and folklore in general. So the second point I would say is that Santa wears red, but Odin wears blue, gray, or spotted clothing. That's something that Jackson Crawford pointed out. Yes, he is said to take various disguises as well. Santa doesn't always wear red. He has been depicted wearing blue or white in many cases, especially in the Slavic regions. It is true that Santa is depicted often wearing more akin to his saintly religious priest clothing in various European countries, especially down south. No one will say for sure where the red suit or whether the Frisian cap that he wears, as well as the holly pipe, or pipe that he is originally comes from. However, I will state that they are rather Scythian in design, or even Frisian in design. The cap, the buttoned-up suit, and the pipe are very akin to various groups in the steppe lands and the Persian culture influenced, but you also see them as things that were the Romans depicted, the Germanics, or those who weren't Roman, they would depict them wearing the Frisian cap. Artwork of Odin often includes him smoking a pipe, as well as one can see the Tolkien's Odinic figure of Gandalf, or the Wand Elf, that pipes smoking fits the motif. As for the holly, there are a lot of euhemerized concepts of holly, which can imply a Christian allegory, but also the concept of the green man in folklore, or the mistletoe of Baldur's death. 3. Odin is not a figure associated with gifts, is what Jackson Crawford says. Well, this is accurate as long as one is speaking of gifts in the method of Santa. However, to say providing offerings to the gods or Odin for blessings or a boon in return is very much within the pagan belief. Being naughty or nice could be implying simply being pious or serving the gods, or living your life honorably. This may be maybe much more Christian aspect of Santa, but one implying that Odin or the Sky Father does not provide blessing or providence over mankind would be a gross misunderstanding. Yes, in the sagas and Eddas, Odin isn't overtly kind or selflessly giving, but that shouldn't be interpreted as evil or lack of any empathy for mankind, as Odin is concerned primarily with the balance of order and chaos. Also, Santa's helpers, such as Black Pete or his counterparts, such as Krampus, haven't always been represented as the most kind-hearted or benevolent beings. Basically, you live your life dishonorably. Krampus could come and take you, or leave you coal, just like the Wild Hunt. If you are out and about, or not pious to the gods or giving offerings, could take your soul with them. The fourth one would be Odin is associated with the winter holiday of Yule, or Yule in the Proto-Germanic word, meaning which some people say a joke or jolly. Some people also say it's a turning of the wheel. That's a whole different argument. But has also been considered possibly to be connected to the word wheel and the turning of the wheel. Odin is considered Yulnir, the Yuler, as Crawford points out. But also you can hear the word Yule Father from time to time. In my opinion, this is a direct correlation to Father Christmas, which would come into play. In addition to the point he mentions, I'll also go over a few other points here, which I'll go in deeper later on. This is going to be a long episode, folks. I hope you have plenty of time on your hands and a Yule fire, or as some people have, those digital Yule log and or hearths that you can play on your streaming service or YouTube to see the fireplace of your choice. That's kind of an interesting thing. Maybe that's a different topic for a different time, but I find it interesting. So in addition to the points he mentioned, I'll say that the 3 Magi, which I'll go over in depth later, or Magi is singular as magus, right, or magoi, of the Persian religion. Their seeking of Christ and divining his arrival via the stars is a direct attempt to merge in Indo-European faiths the divine son, or the son of the Sky Father, the God King worship, and that of the Hebraic Messiah. Remember, the Hebraic Messiah was something that came sort of post. I'm going to say post Persian influence. Some will disagree with me. Meanwhile, there's plenty of scholarly speculation on the Mithraic connection to the worship as well. The Magi had their own cult following within Christianity, mysticism, and in the esoteric alchemy practices. You will sometimes see an adoration of three magi also as much as you would see the Christ child. Though it is not needed to be mentioned here or at this time, I have mentioned it ad nauseum, which I will mention ad nauseum later. The Sky Father and the Divine Holy Mother, or the God or demigod Son, is a pan-Indo-European and even Near Eastern motif. The tale of the angel coming to the pasture to inform the shepherd or the good shepherd of Christ's arrival is very similar to the visit of the goddess to the shepherd in Hesiod's Theogony, the goddess of the muses, who visit Hesiod and tell him the lineage of the gods, as well as the creation story of the world. On a side note, many of the Christian interpretations or understandings of the cosmos are directly compared to that of Hesiod's Theogony. If you haven't read the Theogony of Hesiod or the Work of Days, I would highly suggest you read that as just a basis of understanding not only Greek myth, its connection to Indo-European religion as well, and where Christianity derived much of its New Testament and afterwards religion basis from. These aren't the only connections that Christianity has to pagan religions, especially regarding the holy days or holidays. Holiday means holy days. As a whole article could be written about Saturnalia alone. I'm not a I have studied, lived in Rome, visited Greece, studied a huge amount of Greco-Roman myth and Greco-Roman religion, but I would say it would welcome you to research Saturnalia on your own. It is kind of fascinating. So nor is even a full encompassing article of all the various details and folklore associated with Yule. So in regards to Mr. Crawford, of course, he is a linguist and historian. His translations are good. I think his translations are pretty good. However, to many pagans who follow him, like he knows everything because he knows more about language and history than they do. So they flock to him regarding religion, which he isn't an authority on. This is an insult to a man who understands European languages rather well and should be learned from Old Norse information. Basically, if you're going to him for Old Norse and scholarly information, fair enough, but he openly says he's not a Norse pagan, not a Germanic pagan. So for religious purposes, he's obviously going to have a bias not for it. I would say in a statement that one should look towards one's linguistic or scholarly on a basis of knowledge on their own heritage or Indo-European spirituality, you shouldn't look towards him as this. Authorities are good to reference to, but should be cross-examined. Do not let one person's conclusion rule what you should be doing without digging further. Even this goes for my own takes. While I research heavily, and I talk to others who research even more heavily sometimes than I do, taking my takes as what someone say gospel truth versus doing research on your own or looking at other traditions, specifically if you fall into one tradition versus others. I have a syncretic view, which I'm not going to make anyone adhere to. I'm going to make comparisons to, does not make what I'm saying the end-all be-all of what you must do. I will compare and contrast multiple Indo-European faiths, and I have my own practices in case. But if you're going to compare and contrast and you want to do a syncretic Indo-European faith, then absolutely I'm the source to turn to, and I will give you other sources. But if you want to be a specific Anglo-Saxon or continental Saxon, then I could point you to people like Scott T. Shell or Robert Sass instead, who will give you the continental understanding of when those things were celebrated, and you would be better off focusing on just on them if that's where you're calling to and or your heritage is. So it can be easily mentioned here that Euhemerism, which is attempts at conversion, the Germanization of Christianity and merging of faiths was a result in this Odinic and general pagan plus Christian appeal that Christmas and Yule have. while much of the modern editions, such as Miss Claus, which I would say is Frigga/Freya, the elves, candy, Coca-Cola, and various other elements, often add for a product placement or joyous myth creations from the Americas. It doesn't change that the source of these myths being that of predominantly I'm going to say, Germanic origin. Yes, I understand that Santa isn't just of Germanic origin, but predominantly the understanding we understand from Santa and his motifs are of Germanic origin. I will say that Odin is as much as Santa is St. Nicholas. So if people want to say Santa is St. Nicholas, well, he's just as much Odin in motif as Santa is St. Nicholas. And then Christmas is just as pagan as Yule is Christian. So basically, I hope you find this part of what I have to say enjoyable. I'll go on to other things. So, of course, we have the wild hunt. The scholars have connected the month of Yule to the period of the wild hunt, a ghostly procession in the winter sky. The god Odin, the Allfather, who is attested in Germanic areas as leading the wild hunt and bears the name Yulnir, is increasingly supernatural activity, such as the wild hunt and increased activity of Draugr during the time which the dead unrise and the dead who walk the earth. Of course, you have some people who have attested to, I practice this myself for my children, leaving hay for Sleipnir, which this isn't something I would say is a mandatory. It may be a modern take, but instead of having just a stocking, the children will leave something for Sleipnir, and then their stockings will be filled when he comes and visits. Odin will bring a boon or blessing when depending on your behavior, honor, or reverence to Odin. Usually my family, we will do a whole blot and a dinner for the day before Odin comes to visit, and then we will have the offering, and the next morning the children will open up the presents, which they know openly, because I think that using the Santa Claus myth where Santa comes by and then you have that issue where they find out the presents come from the parents, not Santa, and it dissolves their mystery. Instead of say that, Odin has given you blessings and boons and provided you with the means to buy presents for your children yourself because you love and care for them, and they should love and care for their ancestors and the gods as well. Saying it like that, you've dissolved any of the lies, and you've presented forth to them ancestor worship and proper understanding and adoration of the gods as it should be. And then you don't have that where the disillusion of faith appears, or their understanding is broken, and then they become basically atheist early on. So there's also the ancient custom tradition when sacrifices are made that farmers were to come to a heathen temple, bring with them food that they needed for the feast. At this feast, they were to take part of drinking ale. This is a historical understanding. Also, the livestock were killed in connection with it. Horses also, and the blood from them, which was called a helt, which is a sacrificial blood, or hlat boli. The vessels would holding the blood. So you have the hatinar, the sacrificial twigs, so aspergills, which were sacrificial twigs. These were fashioned like sprinklers, people would say, where they would smear with the blood with the pestles and on the idols, basically in the temple walls. And likely the men presented were sprinkled with blood as well. But the meat of the animals was boiled and served as a food banquet. Fires were to be lit in the middle of the temple floor, and kettles hung over the fires. Sacrificial beaker was to be borne around the fire, and he who made the feast was the chieftain, was to be blessed with the beaker as sacrificial meat. So this narrative continues. The toasts were to be drunk, and the first toast were to be drunk to Odin, victory and power, of course, to the king. The second to Njodr, or Freyr, for harvest and peace. And the third, of course, would either be to, or some people say to Thor, or to the king or chieftain himself. In addition, toasts were drunk in the memory of the departed kinsmen. So you see this. I know that Survive the Jive has a really great video on it for Yule. And that you see this basically way of using aspergill or whatever, where you take the blood of the sacrifice, you usually mix it with mead, you boil it, and you stir it around, and basically, like one would with holy water, you swing it like a sprinkler around, and you get all of the guests basically covered in blood. This is something I did when I went to, that they did at Midgårdsblot, where basically we all formed a circle around the idol, and then they had the blood offering and a branch of a tree, which I think was aspergill. It may have been something else. And you would dip it in the blood, and you'd paint the idol and then swing it around to paint the people. I dipped my whole Mjolnir in and dipped my face, rubbed my hands through the blood and painted the idol myself. But this is something that you can see that's really a safe usage of blood, because it's boiled, it is cut with mead, but this is a way to offer a blood offering. Lives up cold up in the north of mansions and the castles are sometimes on a mountain. So I think of like Asgard, right? So Santa, we talk about Santa Claus, right? He very much is similar to the Sky Father or the Earth Mother, with the wife, his Mrs. Claus. He rules over elves, and he lives in the north. These are very similar concepts. So in many places where you call Father Christmas or Old Man Winter, it is still called Yule. Yule, the Yule Father, is another name for Odin. So you can also see that you could consider the Christmas tree as a representation of Yggdrasil itself. I know there's some extrapolations, which I haven't actually ever seen a reference to properly or sources attested to, which were saying that basically, how sacrifices were hung on trees to Odin, that the red balls that you hang on trees represent a blood sacrifice. I haven't seen any actual proof of this, but I think it's a neat idea if you wanted to incorporate this. So ways I would say, this is in general before I get into deep articles that other people have written, ways to celebrate, in my opinion, the Yuletime traditions, right? So giving thanks for the blessings you have. That's number one. I don't care what position you're in life. I've seen people in refugee camps. I've seen people in the poorest areas of the dregs and trailer parks or in the inner cities be able to give thanks. If you're breathing, you have the God's breath within you, you can give thanks. So give thanks for the blessings you have. Spend time with family and folk and have a celebration of sorts. Decorate or set up an altar for Yule. Also have a Yule tree or decoration. Read from the Havamal, words of Odin, the sayings of Odin, sayings of the High One. Perform a libation offering. Offer food, a meat, uncooked meat, or just the blood, or just meat offering. Offer meat or alcohol. Praise Odin and the gods. Remember your ancestors. Play some traditional music. It could be whatever you deem as traditional music, modern Christmas music, or recreational or recreations of the Germanic pagan music, or just traditional sounding folk music of your region. And then, of course, go out in nature. Even though I know it is very cold where some of you are, it's very cold where I am. So going out in nature may be difficult, but do so. So now I'll go on to, after I've covered that, that's the basics of Yule. I will go on to the Christianized, Germanicized interpretation of Yule. So when analyzing the attempts to make the Gospels Germanic, it is fascinating to note how the religion was changed, resulting in the understanding of Christianity that was more Germanic and pagan after the process than before. Northern European Christians, Celto-Germanics, and sometimes Slavics, don't realize this, but their understanding of Christianity, even today, has been the result of the tactics and rearrangements. Much of what is believed, from folklore to concepts of the soul and afterlife, and even the workings of divinity, are more Christo-Pagan or Indo-European in nature than the original rebellious Judeo-Messiah cult that the faith started with, meaning Christianity. One of the major books used for this conversion, of course, was the Heliand. Of course, I will say that if you wanted to learn more about the Heliand, Dr. Scott Shell on YouTube, Scott T. Shell, he does a lot of work with the continental Saxon language and has done a lot of efforts to show the connections in the Heliand. You could also go to Robert Sass's website. I think it's Alcidu is what it's called. And it has a good breakdown where you can read the Heliand. There's also, you can type in reading the Heliand online, and you can see where making Christ a Germanic king has become forth. So, but I'll be honest, I have been approached by many from the Germanic culture or heritage, as well as other European cultures, who find it hard to fully leave behind Christianity. Often this is because the fear of hell that is constantly preached within Christian faith and psychology, that which keeps one tethered to it. However, some of this is because of the faith, traditions, and community connected to these prevalent beliefs. The thing people are often faced with is an all or nothing approach to their previous culture of faith and their heritage and folk faith. They think they had to abandon the love of any Christian hero, folk hero, pride in any king or leader who was a Christian, and any ritual or world-affirming belief that is perceived to be Christian-based. Often this is what one would call throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Like it or not, Christianity has become intertwined with the European culture. However, much to Christianity's chagrin, quite a lot of so-called Christianity is found on pagan faith. I'm not saying one should embrace any form of Christo-pagan or dual faith approach. That being said, having pride in embracing a degree of European folk faith and history, both good and bad, isn't anti-pagan or anti-heathen. So if you find yourself struggling with this dichotomy, here are a few examples you can meditate on this holiday season. This is where I'll go into the different things that you can look at being a pagan, which are inherited Christian concepts or inherited Christian celebrations. You can see through a pagan point of view, and I find them pretty fascinating. So the manger scene or the birth of Christ. If the manger scene of Christ is something fond to your heart, which is to many people, seeing baby Jesus, etc., remember that Christ is not the first depiction or understanding of the Sky Father having a child with an earthly goddess or mother to give birth to that which would become a hero, the striker and rescuer of mankind. This scene where Zoroastrian Magi follow the stars in a very pagan astrological context, and the angels, which you can see as lesser gods or Valkyrie or the Disir, watch over the birth of a new solar savior. Maybe he's a sailor. Savior isn't new. Walking on water and everything, maybe he's a sailor. And just joking. But the solar savior isn't a new concept. So it's not a new concept. It's not something you have to throw away. The birth of, the Buddha was a birth coming that was foretold by the gods. You have everything from Heracles to Dionysus to Hermes to Baldur, etc. It's not a new concept. It's just a concept they took. The cross/star. The cross is a solar symbol related to the swastika, the kolivrat, and other swirling segments of pagan signs. So I'm not saying embrace all Christian crosses, but the solar cross or the cross iron, there was a time, I can't remember which pope, where they even tried to get rid of the worship of or the adoration of the cross because it was too pagan. If that's not telling you enough of where the cross resides and its thematic approach, you can understand it from there. Sacrificial God. While there are scholars who complain that a sacrificial God that teaches a path to mystic knowledge, salvation, or strength isn't a thing, they are wrong. Dionysus, Heracles, Mithras, Orpheus, Osiris, Cuchulainn, and of course Odin himself, and I would say Baldur, are all depictions of sacrifices made for the purpose of mystic wisdom and the power that is thereby provided to the worshippers. Basically, a sacrificial god, of which Christ represents, is a thing, and any scholar who tries to tell you there isn't such a thing as a dying and being reborn god, or dying and reincarnating god, is false. So the Lord's Supper, easily the 12 disciples, 12 Knights of the Round, which is a whole other concept I can go into later on, about the Knights of the Round and King Arthur, and the comparable 12 gods of Indo-European faith. Usually there's 12 primary gods in the heavens. With an offering, giving an offering of flesh, the bread becomes the flesh, wine and blood, that is very similar to any libation to the gods, which is blessed by the god to whom is being offered to or provided by. One can point out the Judeo connections with offerings and anointments of oil, King David and oil, but this scene, which is like the Last Supper, the Lord's Supper, is much more Indo-European than Hebraic in ritual context, though, of course, they were influenced by each other in some ways. Mostly Judeo was influenced by Indo-European. So the Virgin Mary, a lot of people have fondness of the Virgin Mary. Of course, we can say Virgin Mary is pretty obvious, a goddess cult. The Virgin, Holy Mother, Queen of Heaven, who gives birth to the son of the Sky Father and is lifted up or revered as the status of queen, is an obvious allegorical connection to Frau, lady, or goddesses, as she, which was made to stand in for during the spread of religion. So basically, during the spread of religion, almost every lady was basically turned into a Virgin Mary, a form of Mary, and or a form of saint who was a female. This is pretty common. So the concept of family, even though I would say the family you see within Christianity is a little defunct, because that ain't Joseph's baby. Not being tongue-in-cheek, but being honest. The family, which you see, and of course this is something that people embrace during the holiday period, being with their family, celebrating time with their family. The example of a loving family, warmth giving, frith during the holiday season, is one that is represented with the birth of Christ. So whether it is Yule, Christmas, or another holiday season that you are celebrating, you should look at the birth of family that's not just represented in the birth of Christ, but also represented in multiple families within lore, multiple families within your own family. Celebrating a loving family isn't something very biblical. Isn't something you find much in the Torah or the Talmud. It's definitely something you find in the European faith, right? So now I'll go on to the cult of the Magi. So the cult of Magi is a very interesting concept, where we see how in ancient times these Magi, specifically if you think of Mithraism, had a very Persian influence, a Persian aspect. These Magi basically become a source of religious power and adoration, because not only if they could seek out the Christ child, they could give you blessings or show you a way of magic, etc. Of course, people could say it was political propaganda. If Rome could make Persia, who was obviously not their ally during the time, definitely an enemy, a political enemy, they could make it seem like Persia had their religious order come and bow down to their new god king, then they could say, well, basically they've submitted their Zoroastrian or Mazdism religion to the new Roman variant of Judeo-Roman Christianity. So, here's a little reading I have from my own book, Syncretic Indo-European Faith, regarding the cult of the Magi. The Persian Magi were well known as Zoroastrian priests. There are accounts of the Magi throughout Indo-European areas. Basically, we hear of Magi not only in Persia, Parthia, Bactria, Chorasmia, Aria, Media, and among the Shakas, but also in non-Iranian lands such as Samaria, Ethiopia, and Egypt. Their influence was also widespread throughout Asia Minor. It is, therefore, quite likely that the sacerdotal caste of the Magi was distinct from the Median tribe of the same name. This was written by Zainir Robert Charles of The Dawn of Twilight of Zoroastrianism, 1961 book. So basically, when we go into the Magi, we can see that they are said to travel often and had conducted rituals. This reputation made them synchronistic with mysticism. Due to this, the term magus, often connected with the term wizard or wise man or wizard or vitki, the same thing we would get those terms from, became associated with spells and sorcery. The term magi developed through the various influences in which we get the word magic. Christianity while often stating to be against sorcery of any sort, is also fixated with the magi and wise men who came from the east, Persia, and other territories to represent offerings to the birth of Christ. They do so by following a star that they were known to practice astronomy and astrology for, and they followed the star as far as it could go. Many interpretations of the star go as far as to connect it to the planet Jupiter, which would denote Zeus or Deus, acknowledging his son or Venus, which interestingly is also the star of Lucifer. In the certain Orthodox tradition, the Magi have been considered to be able to grant blessings themselves. In alchemical traditions, there is a focus of the Magi as well, while there also is many interpretations as a political propaganda methods to show Persian wise men who are said to advise the Persian kings bowing down to a new Western religion. So, alchemy, Hermetic concepts, and the Greco-Roman religions, and later Gothic, general Celto-Germanic paganisms were all intermingled into this new Christianity. The Goths have various encounters and exchanges with Persians, Scythians, and Eastern nomadic peoples. Their rather mixed conversion to Christo-paganism, the Goths had this thing where it was where the monarchs and the courtyard was Christian, but the people were pagan for the most time. Developed a cultic following of beliefs such as the previously mentioned baptismal ritual. This is previously mentioned in my book. Among these was the focus on the so-called three wise men who followed the Eastern Star, the Eastern Star is most likely Venus or Lucifer, Lucifer being a term for the dawn star in a male way. Visited the Christ child bearing gifts proclaiming him to be the Messiah. There may be hidden political implications within the text that are showing a Persian religious authority bowing down to the Roman centralized religious figure. This is aside from the fact that the three wise men, Magi, became culturally and religiously objects within Christianity. In modern Christian movements, they are often held in high regard and revered as holy men or saints, especially around the Christmas holiday. We three men, three kings, blah, 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 blah. You have so many songs regarding the three kings, as they say, which weren't kings, the three wise men, right? Magi, as they were. However, in older forms of Christian faith, the attachment to these Magi were more on a religious level. They were made into saints and were associated with the names Melchior, Gaspar, and Balthazar, respectively, though the spellings and pronunciations differ from region to region. The adoration of the Magi, prayers to them, and mentionings of them may have been influenced by or directly associated with the Mithraic cult of Rome at the time of its Greco-Iranian theme motifs, Frisian cap-wearing depictions of Mithras. You will see depictions of the Magi, especially in the old Gothic times, wearing Frisian caps. The Magi themselves became associated with not only wisdom but with magic, and the ritual as the word magic is derived from the same word origins as magi. The Magi themselves have been depicted on alchemical scrolls and on coins, as well as prayer talismans for luck. The Magi have been depicted within Christianity quite often within paintings and statues depicted to them. In Cologne, Germany, there is a shrine dedicated to them called, forgive me if I get this wrong, Der Dreikongen Schrein, which is basically the Shrine of the Three Kings. I probably pronounced that wrong, but Schrein, which when you look at it, the Shrine of the Three Kings. I went there. I visited Cologne, Germany. I saw a shrine, a giant shrine of the Three Kings of the Magi. It was like a whole altar just to these three, kings who were obviously magical in nature and of a Indo-European, Persiatic, but also Mediterranean magical origin. This was a large gilded tomb that is said to contain the relics of these three magi. It may be conjecture, but aside from the Persian influence directly presented in the characteristics of the magic, there's also trinity schema that exists within the three magi. There's a trinity within it. In Aelfric Avery's book, Goth's Descendants, he speculates that the Goths saw the Magi and interpreted them as their own Germanic gods, especially often depicting the leading white-bearded one as being Odin or Goth. Another thing that is noted is the presence of the Zodiac within Christian art. A parallel has been drawn between the 12 Zodiac depicting around Mithras. I've been to many Mithraeums, and you do have the 12 Zodiac around or in the motifs of the Mithraeums, and the 12 disciples of Jesus. This isn't surprising, as the number 12 often depicts a holy number with Indo-European paganism, within the gods being grouped by 3, 7s, and 12s. There's a few other numbers. Also, the Roman adoption of various Greek culture in the zodiac and astrology were very prominent. So that covers the three magi, which you will see a lot of three magi offerings and three magi concepts. So let's go to just various different topics about the Yule season. So Survive the Jive, somebody who I follow closely, and I would suggest you also follow if you're not, following me first, of course, but, definitely follow him. He has a lot of followers, so I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this long and rambling podcast, then you probably have already followed him. But he also said that, so he's all talking about wassailing, right? And then I made a post about Yule where someone, one of my followers commented and said wassail as a Yuletide greeting to one of my posts, just like a wassail. Another person replied to him that it was too early to bless apple trees, right? I thought that was interesting. It was too early to bless apple trees, but my reply was not exactly. This is also a winter tradition for bringing in the spring. Survive the Jive has a video, of course, and he also had a post where he connected Christmas caroling to the wassailing. So he was saying that wassailing in Anglo-Saxon Yuletide tradition survives in two forms. This is from Survive the Jive. Door-to-door Christmas carol singing, which carried on even in North America. The carol singing tradition originated with wassailers, and in that sense is still widespread amongst the English-speaking world, although church carols are different traditions. The second type, he says, survives only in England's West Country and involves singing to apple trees to increase their harvest the next year, which would be after winter. This takes place on the 12th night of the Julian calendar, which is testament to its antiquity. So he has a great video about it. I think you should follow if you're interested in those connections. So my good friend, the Chad Pastoralist, has a long Yule post too, which he gave me permission to read. He spoke of so I spoke of vows and making a New Year's oaths previously, right? The Sumbil, which is a oath or blot before the gods, but also before your frith or your group or in a moot, which you're saying an oath to the gods that you're to be held to. So you may be asking for a boon, right? But you're saying an oath that you swear that you will do this before the gods and before the people amongst you, and the people should be holding you accountable. This was taken very seriously. So, but New Year's resolutions may or may not be associated with this connection, right? So he has posted a thing about vowel stringing. The term which he says is he posted Heistringing or vowel stringing can be also referred to as oath swearing or oath binding. In Old Norse society, oath swearing was primarily conducted at the Yule upon a sacrifice or of a sacred boar. In different sagas, he mentions different sagas. The Hirvarar saga, Ok Hedrick, Helgakvital, Hjorvardsenar, which he has a link to, and in the Yngling saga. At the social gatherings upon a bagr or a higr, an arm ring, would be given. This is seen also in Beowulf. In the Landnakmadbok, an Icelandic law instruction that the leaders of the Althing, anglicized of Althing, a general assembly, general gathering, or appointment of time of gathering, were ridden their arm rings with oxen blood. So they would put their arm rings with the blood of a sacrifice. And Althing was historically organized to settle disputes of land, political, and religious issues. For example, by 1000 AD, the Icelandic Althing had declared that it was obligatory to persecute one's own relatives for blaspheming against the Norse gods. Yes, blaspheming is a thing within Indo-European religions and within Celtic-Germanic religions. So furthermore, the law stated that a sacred temple ring of 2 ounces or more would lie on the altar of every main temple. Every man who needed to perform legal acts before the cult must swear an oath on this ring and mention 2 or more witnesses. I name the witness, he must say, that I swear the oath on the ring, a lawful oath. So help me, Njodr, and the Almighty Os, which would be presumably Thor, but also Os could also be Othin, because the Othala Os could be referred to Othin. Therefore, the sagas mention a pedestal in a middle of a temple where the sacrificial blood is held, and that a 20-ounce arm ring must be kept on the pedestal, which is used for swearing the oath for the Gotthar. With the Gotthar, which is we use the word Gothi normally, it's a pagan priest, to swear as a contract binding mortal men and gods together, which could be done on Mother's Night and Yule. So that's his information regarding Yule. So I had a friend, acquaintance of mine. This is the 12 Days of Yule. Going the 12 Days of Yule, which is a modern interpretation. An acquaintance of mine in a heathen group shared a basic overview of the 12 Days of Yule that one can use for practice. While it may not be 100% accurate, depending on which reconstructing calendar one is using, Saxon versus Norse versus Continental German, this follows more of a solstice-centered observation. It is a good outline, and actual practice observation is what matters in the end. But it's like I always have said, practice matters more than being extremely authentic to the history. You should be 100% interpreted and informed by the history and the lore. But practice is beyond anything. You making a libation or offering to the gods, reading the sagas, and trying to live your life praising those gods and honorably means more than you being perfectly 100% in the proper garb and the proper decorative festivities and doing the exact same prayer that your ancestor did. Those should come later. Maybe you should research them. But you doing any practice at all, as long as it's in earnest and something you're doing, not blaspheming, not willy-nilly, but something you're doing with care and with adoration, is the number one thing you should do. That being said, he gives us 12 days that you could pray in Yule. So the 20th, he says Mother's Night, which would be Mother's Night, which 21st, some people say, is the honor of mothers and symbolic birth of the new year. The 21st is the solstice and celebrates the return of the sun by lighting fires and staying awake to greet the sunrise. And the 22nd, the wild hunt and celebration is recounted in its lore and placing offerings outside for Odin. 23rd, which could be a Thursday, Thor's Day in celebration of the breaking of winter's back with trials, might, drinking, and feasting in his honor. These are just things you can do, ways to do it. 24th for the house rites and is a time for offering libation and focusing on the household. The 25th is the day of the kith and kin, where we honor each other and share Yule gifts. 26th is Father's Night. It's a reflection of the father's importance within the family and a day for his celebration. The 27th for the Vanir, in honor of their part of nature's upcoming rebirth. The 28th is the night of the Aesir and their role in the past year and new year. The 29th for the ancestors is a day for recounting the stories of the predecessors and a reminder of all we owe those who came before us. The 30th for the land rights is a celebration and leaving offerings outside for them and focusing on your land. The 31st, 12th night for lighting Yule log, making oaths for the new year, like we discussed before, making oaths or vows, and burning all of the celebration leavings. These are not, of course, mandatory things or 100% tested, but those, if you want to rewind, of course, if you're listening to this, and I have this posted elsewhere on my social media, those are good traditions to do, and they fit, even if they don't fit exactly within the calendar period, they definitely fit within the proper theme, motif, and spirit of our Germanic ancestors or of the Yule season. So I have another one here from Whitgard, which is another account I found on Telegram regarding Mother's Night and Yule. He says there is much speculation over the date of Yule in the heathen calendar, which is what I'm saying, but a lot involves talking past each other on the terms of what they mean. The ancient Germanic calendar was divided into two halves. The summer Misere and the winter Misere, while the months of Lenten, spring, and harvest, autumn, were otherwise unknown or seen as outer edges of those 2 months. In the Anglo-Saxon calendar, at least, these were marked within a month, seasons separated by midwinter and midsummer. So you have December and January, June, and July. A notable feature of Germanic timekeeping is that they measured the year according to a lunar solar calendar. This means that it was measured by both the sun and the moon, rather than the current solar calendar we now use. The months were measured by the moon. The clue is in the name, monath, month. But that's also where you get fortnight. And a lot of things were done within the moon. But the sunstead, solstice, and evening night or equinox were measured by the sun. The problem with this is that there are around 13 lunar cycles in 1 year of a solar cycle, so every year is about 10 or 11 days too long. For this, Anglo-Saxons had the solution of inserting the month Thrilithe, a leap month for every 3 years, making 13 months rather than 12. There's a whole thing going online if you guys are interested, what people are talking about. If you had 13 months, everything would make sense. And it's not just an Anglo-Saxon thing. It's definitely a counter-Julian date thing. Honestly, it's always annoying when you get past Augustus, and you get to September, and it's the 8th, and Sep would be the 7th, and then October should be the 8th, and October is the 10th. So the 8th, 9th, 10th, it's all just drastically messed up. Your December like decade is the 10th, but it's the 12th month. It's very, very much messed up. But so he goes to say that this also means that the start of each month, which began at the first slither of light of the new moon, would also be different to the solstices and equinoxes of each year. This is easy to keep up with when you aren't using a formal calendar. But the Germanic tribes adopted the Roman calendar system. It caused the same problems to align with them. Let me just also say, this is a personal take, that the Germanic tribes adopting the Roman calendar is where we get the concepts that Thor is the same day as Jupiter Day, where you have Thor's day is Jupiter's day, and somehow Thor and Jupiter are the same beings. People who use this as a correlation are not doing proper research. It's the most surface level understanding there is, and it is wrong. Anyways, to go on. In De Temporum Ratione, the reckoning of time, the Venerable Bede, venerable to some, wrote regarding the English months. They begin the year on the 8th calends of January, 25th December, when we celebrate the birth of the Lord. That very night, which we hold so sacred, they used to call by the heathen word Modranit, that is Mother's Night, which we suspect or of ceremonies they actually enacted all night. So this tells us that the Mother's Night was not only held sacred for heathens, but also as well for Christians. But that is marked as the beginning of the old new year. However, why is it now we celebrate the solstice around the 21st and 22nd of the year, but now the 25th? In the same book, Bede continues, the equinoxes are to be observed on the 8th calends of April, 25th of March, 8th calends of October, 24th of September, and the solstice on the 8th calends of July, 24th of June, and 8th calends of January, 25th of December. This shows that Mother's Night was on the night of winter solstice. However, its dating on the 25th was true in Bede's own way, according to Old Roman reckoning of the year, but this system was also 10 to 11 minutes out. Thus, by the time we read the Enchiridion, composed by Berithfirth in 11th century, the solstice has been pushed back by a few days, and he reckoned with an amendment system around the 22nd of December, which is around when we still hold it today. Remember, calendars they change, the world rotates, the times change, the sun and moon's astrological correlations change, the zodiacs change. This shouldn't be any surprise to people. So basically what he's saying is that it's not wrong to be around the 21st-ish. It's nothing anyone else doesn't know. I find it interesting. So we'll talk about the Nisse or Tomte. This is because I like gnomes, and the Nisse and Tomte are very close to brownies and gnomes. And if you aren't gnome-pilled, get gnome-pilled. There's plenty of gnome knowledge online, and gnomes are the best cryptids ever. And if you don't know that gnomes are in your life, then you can just continue not knowing, because once you acknowledge that aspect of the darkness within your mind that acknowledges all gnomes, you can never go back, my friend. So, a Nisse, which is Danish, or Tomte, which is the Norwegian, Tomte Nisse, which is sometimes a Swedish combination of the two, sometimes referred in English in other countries as the Tomten for short, is a small folk spirit from Scandinavian folklore and literature who often appears as either a tiny boy or a wizened old man with a large beard and wearing a Frisian cap or a sleeping cap and tunic. They are thought to either bring good luck and blessings, or, however, in a bad temperament, if they are disturbed or if their environment is tampered with, they can cause torment, pranks, and or even curses. They are thought to be connected with farms and farm animals. However, this could be because a farmer who told of them also had his farm near a burial mound. I'll get into this with the burial mound. This is their association with burial mounds and the spirits of the dead, like previously mentioned in my other works, the trolls or the draugr, or various beings we discussed in Samhain or Halloween season, of being associated with the dead. In folklore, their powers included, but were not limited to, shape-shifting, turning others into tomte. If you want to become a gnome, the gnome can turn you into a gnome. And working various magics, though they could also bless one's farm with produce and just give you general luck for you and your family. It is said to please the tomte, one should stick to traditions, being respectful, performing appropriate rituals, and living with honor. Folklore and folktales have one ritual of offering gifts, a bowl of porridge, sort of like a blot on Christmas Eve. If not performed, the tomte would torment the family and the farm. The connections between tomte garden gnomes, who protect one's garden, if you remember garden gnomes, protect your garden, and the Christmas gnomes or elf is rather obvious. Brownies are also possibly connected. One can see the sources of the burial ground, the elf, the dwarf, the vetyr, the fae, with the dead and ancestors as a deep heritage connection that should be used to bring back ancestor worship and not just trivialize as children's Christmas fun alone, though it is a great way to introduce the children to these topics. Of course, and sadly, Christianity associated the tomte with the devil and demons and false gods, which worked on the behest of witches, which is sad, as such things work to sever people from their heritage and the ancestors, resulting in a loss of connectivity that we sometimes see today. So basically, remember this Christmas to pour out some porridge from the tomte or Nisse and your gnomes, and maybe they won't turn you into gnomes. Maybe they'll give you a little extra blessing. I will say that I have plenty of gnomes on my tree. I have gnomes near my altar, and I have definitely given me and my family a libation to the gnomes or the Nisse. You can find them everywhere now. They're actually very popular in their designs all throughout Europe and now throughout Americas. And I would say their coming back is a very pagan thing in general. So I would say last but not least in my topics of the night is various things about Old Man Winter. So Old Man Winter, interesting topic. Jack Frost, some people argue is not an actual thing. Dead Mortals, which is the Slavic Santa in some ways. And of course, like I said, Father Christmas. So Jack Frost is an English euphemism for what people called Old Man Winter. He is the incarnation of the elements of winter, such as ice, snow, frost, and the deadly cold. His trademark is the window frost that creates a diamond-like or vine-like shapes on your window. You know, that permafrost that comes on your window that looks, just magnificent but scary at the same time. With this, he's often seen as a negative spirit who causes pain and suffering. Jack Frost is thought to be a Northern European folk spirit that may be represented in Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and even Finnish traditions, with the chapter of the called the Frost Fiend and the Kalevala being dedicated to him. The Kalevala is a Finnish excerpts of runic concepts. I think it's a very interesting take, a very interesting understanding of the creation. Vainamoinen creates the world through the runes. It's very correlated to Nordic understandings, but I don't want to get into Finnish spirituality because I'm not as well versed in it, and some people have strong feelings towards it. It's sad. But I will read from the rune. I would guess this is, can't remember which rune this is associated with, but Frost, the son of wicked parents, hero son of evil manners, hastens off to freeze the ocean, goes to fasten down the floodgates, goes to still the ocean currents. As he hastens on his journey, takes the leaves from all the forests, strips the meadows of their verdure, robs the flowers of their colors. When his journey he had ended, gained the border of the ocean, gained the seashore curved and endless. On the first night of his visit, freezes he the lakes and rivers, freezes too the shores of ocean, freezes not the ocean billows, does not check the ocean currents. On the sea a finch is resting, bird of song upon the waters, but his feet are not yet frozen, neither is his head endangered. When the second night frost lingered, he began to grow important. He became a fierce intruder, nevertheless grew in his invasions, freezes everything before him, since the fiercest cold of Northland turns to ice the boundless waters, ever thicker, 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 grew the ice on sea and ocean, ever deeper, 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 fell the snow on field and forest, frozen the hero's ship of beauty, cold and lifeless of Ahti, sought to freeze wild Lemminkainen, freeze him lifeless as his vessel, asked the minstrel for his lifeblood, for his ears and feet and fingers. So later in the 19th century, up to the current era, Jack Frost has become somewhat of an anti-hero who is seen as a benevolent being that comes to defend the people in bad snowy times, sort of this dangerous being. In 1998, there was a movie where the titular Jack Frost is the dead spirit of a young boy's father, I think, and who comes to like help the family back after he died. In 2012, the animated movie of The Rise of the Guardians, he's a young, slightly edgy hero who joins otherwise mythical heroes to win a battle and defend the holidays of the world. However, I am fond of the Japanese video game version of the Shin Megami Tensei series, which presents him as a trickster sprite made of snow. In modern English, he's sadly just a euphemism for winter, but still exists in most dialects, Jack Frost. So Ded Moroz in Russia, he is known as Ded Moroz, or commonly a Grandfather Frost, and is synchronized with St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, and Father Christmas. In many ways, this puts him in an allegory of the Odinic Yule Father, and even the Wild Hunt to a degree. In the Slavic representation of him, he usually has a large fur coat, and a magical staff of sorts, and sometimes rides in the troika, a three-horse-drawn cart, which is sometimes a sleigh. While he's become a separate entity within Slavic traditions versus the English Jack Frost, with Ded Moroz, He's a benevolent being now. It is said that he is derived from a winter spirit that was represented as an old wizard in pre-Christian Slavic times of the Rus and demonized by Christianity as a demon at first, but until he was absorbed by the Santa myth. It is said that he has a granddaughter, which is called the Snow Maiden, who represents the new year and together with him helps defend others from Baba Yaga. Though this snow maiden is often represented as a spirit in the form of a young girl who wanders the forest. She personally reminds me of the Japanese Yuki-onna, who is a spirit who operates similarly to her. Dead Moroz and the Slavic myths surrounding his history could be a whole video on its own, and I would highly encourage those who know more about regarding the Slavic faith. I do plan on making a Slavic faith post later on, and its history to expound upon it as much like with more of the continental Slavic history that I haven't been able to touch on here. Often the myth is downplayed or simply not understood in other parts of the West, or is especially in the U.S. where anything Slavic tends to be demonized due to wars. Old Man Winter. Old Man Winter is an interesting depiction of the forces of winter, and one we usually see in artwork from the 1800s, though sometimes and sometimes before. He is rather classically pagan in style, or how paganism is illustrated during the era of the 1800s, with him being the disembodied head of a wintry-looking bearded old man who blows cold winter over a map or land. He is represented similarly to the Greek god Boreas. Uller, the Norse god and Germanic god Uller, is the god of the hunters, as well as skiing, which he is depicted as doing often, and in snow survival. Uller is sometimes represented as winter and is similar to the form of Father Christmas, though I would argue Father Christmas is Odin. So winter as the divine feminine. I don't want to forget the divine feminine aspects of winter season. Just as the gods have a male and female, consorts and spouses for a balanced representation, so too does the divine winter. While I'll argue that Odin is Yule father and was absorbed into Santa Claus, it too has been seen that within Mrs. Claus, one can see the consorts of the Sky Father and or Earth Mother and Queen of Heaven represented her as herself. With some Christians, this will be expressed via the Maria cult, but others, other beings such as Frau Holle, are also seen. Frau Holle deserves a whole video on her own, but is a Germanic goddess which is researched extensively by Jacob Grimm. While some think she is an adaptation of a creature called the Huldr or Huldra, which is a humanoid forest creature that seduces men, similar to a dryad in some ways. Grimm represents her as a Germanic goddess, and others have argued that she may have connection to a supreme goddess, Maria Gumbatas, which I don't actually like her at all. For certain things, argues this connection with a pre-Indo-European Neolithic goddess cult, but I disagree with her rather political anti-patriotic understanding and see these goddesses as a pan-Eurasian understanding of the Sky Father and Earth Mother. This whole concept she has of there being a matriarchy before the Indo-European patriarchy came over is rather BS in my opinion. That being said, Frau Holle has been often absorbed into the winter associations, as well as being called Old Mother Frost, almost like a female version of Jack Frost, and also taking part in the Wild Hunt. It is said her beating of a feather bed pillow out of a balcony causes snow to fall. Other arguments are that her association with winter is representative of the goddess Hel, or Hela, and the freezing cold of Helheim. So lastly, we have the Kalech, or Winter Queen Beirda, who is a Gaelic hag or divine ancestor who is said to produce winter storms. Though she is thought to have made hills and certain mountains by dropping rocks from above or smashing her hammer, almost like a female Thor. She has been depicted as being one-eyed giantess and having dark blue skin, much like the goddess Brigid, or she is associated with who is associated with spring, dawn, and birth. Kalech is associated with winter, darkness, and the end of the year, possibly death itself before the new beginning. In addition, there is much more that meets the eye with winter traditions. Often you think of fairy tales or children's stories milked for consumerism or modern political agenda. These are actually found in deeper European, Eurasian spiritualism. So with that, I want to end this very long Yule episode. I hope you guys got some out of it. I hope it wasn't too much rambling. I hope my mispronunciations here and there of Gaelic or just impromptu Old Norse without thinking weren't too distracting. But ultimately, I wish you all, whether you celebrate in January or December or early February, a great Yule, a wonderful winter solstice, and I hope you and your family are blessed by the gods, because the coming new year, I see victory and blessing for all of us. Hail the Aesir and the Vanir, hail the gods and goddesses. I pray that the ancestors watch over you. Thank you.